Hello there. This is Zach. You may know me from my fan edits I've made of Star Wars Revenge of the Sith and the Clone Wars, and also the Bad Batch. And one of the most frequent comments or suggestions or requests that I've gotten on my videos about my fan edits are people saying that it would be cool to make a fan edit that is literally every canon Star Wars like movie and TV show episode edited into one long movie. And to that I say that's ridiculous, and I personally don't understand why anyone would want that. I just don't think that putting everything into a 200 plus hour long video file would add to the experience of it, when most of it you can watch or read or play in order without needing any sort of editing to achieve that. The reason why I edited the final arc of the Clone Wars together with Revenge of the Sith was because I think it's really interesting to see those stories in a new light when you see them happening at the same time. And simply transitioning from TV episodes to movies or whatever when they're already in order and they don't overlap, I don't think that would really add that much to the experience. Also, like I said, the video file would be like over 200 hours or maybe 300, I don't know. But it would be an insanely huge file, and just it wouldn't be worth it to me at all. But something that I have been working on, which I guess you could say is sort of similar, but in my mind better, is I've been compiling a list of every Star Wars movie and TV episode, as well as the books and games that are canon, and putting them all in a chronological list. So if you do want to go through all of the Star Wars canon content in chronological order, I think this will help a lot. Also, since there's so many like Disney Plus series being made and so many books and stuff, I think it really helps to have a list like this to kind of keep track of where everything takes place. Also, if you are new to Star Wars, or if you've seen the movies or most of the movies and want to dive deeper into the TV shows, maybe even read some books, then maybe this video will help you know where to start. I'm gonna give my recommendations based off of my own personal opinions of all this content, which you may or may not agree with. And I'm gonna go over like all of the basics of the order in this video. But if you want more details, then click the link in the description that'll take you to a Google document that I have that has all of this listed out very cleanly in order. It has notes from me on who I would recommend each piece of content to, and it also has links that you can click to go directly to the Disney Plus watch page for each episode or movie. So yeah, it's pretty useful. Before we go through the list, just a few more things that I want to mention are that I continuously update this list, not after every single episode that comes out, but I do update it pretty frequently. So if you're watching this video some distant time after I make it, I most likely will have updated the Google document that's linked in the description with the new stuff that has come out since I made this video. Also, I want to say mild spoiler warning for all of the things I talk about in this. I will try to spoil as little as possible, but in simply bringing up what some of these stories are, like, you kind of can't avoid a few spoilers, but you know, I'll try to keep those to minor spoilers as much as I can. Now, I know there's different levels of Star Wars fans. Some people are really into it, like me, where they like consuming most or all of the stories. There's people who are really into it who don't like the new canon as much, but like the older Legends expanded universe more, which is great. That's not going to be on this list, but that's fine if you like that. Then there's people who are, you know, more casual. Maybe they've just seen the movies, or they've also seen the Mandalorian, but not the animated shows or something like that. And all sorts of varying levels. So really, you can skip most Star Wars stories that are on this list if you just don't care about them, if it's just not your thing, because I mean, there's a lot of variety here, and not every story is going to be for everyone. Okay, so starting off with the list, one more thing to mention is that the whole chronological order thing, it's a little bit of a lie, not really, but there are certain stories that I don't think you should watch or experience in chronological order, because I think it's better either for the flow of the pacing of the overall narrative or for tonal reasons to watch a few things a little bit out of order, which I will explain, but most of that ends up coming up with the Clone Wars series. There's some arcs that get separated if you watch it in the true chronological order, and I think it just makes the most sense to experience arcs together to get that full story at a time. And then there's also some things such as there will be a silly droids arc in the middle of the later seasons that are very dark, and it's just tonally strange, so I've moved arcs like that forward in the timeline to just move it out of the way of the dark stuff so the tones don't clash as much. But anyways, for all of the things that aren't in chronological order like that, you honestly won't even notice it if you just go through the list in this order, so it really doesn't matter too much. Alright, speaking of not watching in chronological order, the first thing that I think you should watch if you are a new Star Wars fan who has seen nothing from Star Wars is the original trilogy. Those are the first 3 films that were made in the 70s and 80s that kicked off what Star Wars is. These movies are really the core story of Star Wars, and everything that has been made since has built off of concepts introduced in these movies. Also, if you watch some of the prequel content before these movies, it'll spoil certain reveals in them. So if you happen to have never seen any Star Wars before, I highly recommend that you watch episodes 4, 5, and 6, A New Hope, The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi first. And if it's not too difficult, I think you should watch them in the original theatrical cuts. There have been some fan edits made by other people that restore these versions that are not officially available. The main 2 projects that do this are Harmy's Despecialized Edition, which I have seen multiple times, and 4K 77. The 4K 77 project, they have restored actual scans of the film reels from A New Hope in 4K, and they're currently working on doing it for Return of the Jedi and The Empire Strikes Back, which those will be called 4K 83 and 4K 80, respectively, because of the year that they came out. They're gonna finish the Return of the Jedi one first, I think, so that's why I mentioned that first. Anyways, if you watch the current versions of the movies that are on Disney Plus, it's not that bad, but George Lucas made changes to the movies over the years that most fans would agree were not for the better of the story. And if you're someone who's completely new to Star Wars, you probably won't care at all about those changes. But like I said, most fans agree that just the best version of the story is in the theatrical cuts. Okay, so after you've seen the original trilogy, I honestly think the best way to experience Star Wars is kind of going back to the start and then just going through in chronological order, because characters introduced early on in the timeline show up much later, and it's best to have already seen their stories. Also, by the way, I will be displaying the year that these different Star Wars stories take place in, which, if you don't know the dating system that fans use for Star Wars content, we measure years in terms of before the Battle of Yavin and after the Battle of Yavin. The actual Battle of Yavin taking place in A New Hope, the original Star Wars movie. So yeah, keep that in mind. And since the Star Wars timeline covers so many years, it's been split up into these eras. So chronologically, the first era is the High Republic. In terms of when these stories are being released, this is the newest era, and right now it is mostly in books and comics. When it comes to books on this list, I think I have every single adult novel on it. I don't think I have all of the young adult novels on it right now. I might add all of them. And then I have a few junior novels, because there's books for like different reading levels that they publish. And I also haven't read all of the books. I've read maybe almost 25% of them, so I've read a decent amount, and I will give recommendations on the ones that I have read, but the ones that I haven't, I can't give an opinion on, and my placement of it in the timeline is just as close as I can tell, having not actually read it. So that's something that could change after I do read it. I might think it's better to read that book at a different point in the timeline. And I have indicated in the document of this that the books are optional. They pretty much flesh out characters or events from the films and series that weren't explored very much in them. A lot of them are really good, but I get that like some people just don't like reading. You could also listen to audiobooks if you don't like reading, but the books are pretty much optional. Now, that being said, when it comes to the High Republic, right now the books are the main part of the story. And it's not like that with other eras, but you should start with the book Light of the Jedi. This is one of the only books in the era I've read so far, just because I'm not all the way caught up on it. But this book is really fantastic. It sets up this whole era that takes place 200 years before the movies, where the Jedi are in their golden age, and them, along with the whole Republic, is not corrupt yet, and the Jedi are more accepting of things in the Order, and you see a lot of unique Jedi and ways that they use the Force. I really like how they've explored all of this. It's a very fresh take on Star Wars, but it like completely fits in universe as like a part of the history of the galaxy. And I highly recommend Light of the Jedi. Even if you haven't read a single Star Wars book yet, I think this is a very good entry point, since unlike most of the other books, these main High Republic novels are the main story instead of just supporting stories, and it really does feel like you're reading a movie, like a brand new Star Wars movie. There's just such a great epic scale and really great new characters introduced in this book. Next is the young adult novel Into the Dark. I haven't read this yet, but apparently it takes place during Light of the Jedi, and I think a little bit before it, but just based on what I think of Light of the Jedi, after reading that, I think that's the best entry point into this era, so I think most likely you should read Into the Dark after. Then we also have the junior novel A Test of Courage. I listened to the audiobook for this, and I thought that it was alright. If you really like the High Republic era and want to get more of it, then this is a pretty good story, but I mean, at the same time, it's very skippable. And it's not like it was the greatest thing ever, but it wasn't bad. And that also takes place sort of during Light of the Jedi, but I'd say just read Light of the Jedi first and then read things that kind of overlap with it. And then I have a few comics on this list. I'll be honest with you guys, personally, I don't care for comics that much in general. They're just not my preferred medium for storytelling. So I'm not into comics that much myself, so I don't have that many of them on the list. Also, if I did include all of the comics on the list, they would kind of dominate it because there's so many. So there's just a few here and there. Maybe if I get more into comics in the future, I'll make like a different list that does include all of them, because I wouldn't want to put them on the same list because, like I said, there's so many that almost the entire list would just be comics. So the rest of the High Republic content that is currently out, I have not read yet, but I will go through what, at least based on my research, seems to be the chronological order to read them in. There's the manga Edge of Balance, the novel The Rising Storm, which is the sequel to Light of the Jedi. I've heard a lot of good things about it, and I can't wait to read it once I get the time to do so. There's a junior novel, Race to Crash Point Tower, which takes place during The Rising Storm. And then there's the young adult novel, Out of the Shadows, which is a sequel to Into the Dark, I believe. And then also, there's an audio drama called Tempest Runner. Later this year, or actually this month, we're getting more High Republic books. There's The Fallen Star, which is the sequel to The Rising Storm, so the third of the adult novels. Mission to Disaster, which is a junior novel, and Midnight Horizon, which is a young adult novel. Then sometime within the High Republic, the game Eclipse will take place. This game is being developed by Quantic Dream. It's going to be a game where you make choices as to what happens in the story, and it will change the narrative in like a branching way. And we don't know that much about it or exactly when it takes place yet, so this is just kind of a guess. And then there's also going to be the series The Acolyte, which is live action. It's supposed to be about like rising dark side powers towards the end of the High Republic era. Okay, so the next era is the Fall of the Jedi. This is the main prequel era that mainly tells the rise and fall of Anakin Skywalker. Releasing this year is a new novel called Padawan, which is about Obi-Wan when he's a Padawan to Qui-Gon, and it's going to take place sometime before the novel Master and Apprentice, which is also about Obi-Wan being Qui-Gon's Padawan. I've read that book. It is very good. If you like those characters, I highly recommend that you read it. And if you want more clarity on why Qui-Gon oftentimes disagreed with the Jedi Council and like where the Chosen One prophecy comes from, then this is where you actually find those answers. Then there's the young adult novel Queen's Peril, which is about Padme and how she becomes queen and how she gets all her handmaidens who are decoys and bodyguards. And then it ends up overlapping with the Phantom Menace after you finish chapter 15 in the book. So if you're going through all of this for the first time, which most likely I don't think that many people who haven't seen the Phantom Menace are gonna read some book first, but I mean, if you just so happen to be doing that, yeah, then stop at chapter 15, then watch the movie so it won't spoil the movie, then finish the book. I don't really recommend this book that much. It's kind of a political thriller, but I found the plot to not be very engaging, and it's also sort of like a chick flick. So if you're into chick flicks, you might like it, but it wasn't really for me. It gives some more context to the background of what's going on in The Phantom Menace, which is nice though. Then we have Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. This is the first episode in chronological order of the Skywalker saga. And this really is a necessary piece of content in order to understand other stories in the prequel era. The first two of the prequel trilogy films aren't regarded as being the greatest. They have their flaws. They can be kind of enjoyable anyways, but they really are necessary to understand the rest of the prequel content. I have also included the Forces of Destiny shorts in this. Basically, they're these 2D animated, like they're usually like 1 or 2 minute long short episodes that are like very made for kids, and most of them are skippable. Heck, all of them are skippable, but some of them are fun to watch anyways. I'm not going to talk about any more of them in this video, but if you go to the Google document, they are in the list with individual recommendations on each one. And then 4 years after The Phantom Menace, we have the young adult novel Queen's Shadow. This book is about Padme transitioning from being the Queen of Naboo to being a senator. I have started reading it, but I haven't finished it yet. So far, I like it quite a bit more than Queen's Peril, but I don't love it or anything yet. And what's nice is that you actually don't need to read Queen's Peril before this book, because this book was published before Queen's Peril, and Queen's Peril was kind of made as a prequel. So there's no like vital information from Queen's Peril that you need to read Queen's Shadow. You can kind of just jump in here if you want. All right, 6 years after that is Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Like I said, this movie and The Phantom Menace, in my opinion, they're not the greatest, but you do need to watch them to understand like the Clone Wars show. Next is an audio drama called Dooku Jedi Lost. You can buy this as a book, but the book is the script for the audio drama, so I think it's best to listen to it as an audio drama, which is how it was sort of intended to be presented. And this story actually takes place before Attack of the Clones, but I think it's best to read it here, or rather to listen to it here, just so that Dooku is a more mysterious figure in Attack of the Clones, because I mean, this will really like demystify him. It's basically his whole backstory as seen through the eyes of his apprentice Asajj Ventress, who is basically finding out about Dooku's past while she's doing a mission in the present time during this. It's very good, and I really love how it really fleshes out how the Jedi Order works prior to the Clone Wars. And of course, Dooku himself, you really understand him more, where in the prequel movies, he can be kind of confusing because he just doesn't have enough screen time to be fully developed. So yeah, it's a great backstory to Dooku. After that is the novel Brotherhood, which is coming out this year. It's going to be about how Anakin becomes a Jedi Knight, and then Obi-Wan's mission early in the Clone Wars to Cato Nemoidia, and how Anakin ends up rescuing him. And I think it's also going to be the first time that the Jedi are made aware of Ventress. Also coming out later this year is the young adult novel Queen's Hope. This is like the last novel in the Padme trilogy, and it's gonna take place sometime during the Clone War. I don't know exactly where it's going to place in with chronological order, so we'll just have to wait and see. Alright, then we have The Clone Wars, which was the first Star Wars TV show made. I think it's absolutely excellent. It really developed the canon Star Wars universe and expanded upon it like way more than the movies had before it. And all of George Lucas's great ideas that were poorly executed in the prequel movies are executed much better here, and it just fleshes out the whole prequel era and makes it very enjoyable. There's some new characters that are really great too, such as Ahsoka and Rex. And yeah, I really just highly recommend that you watch The Clone Wars if you haven't. I think it's kind of essential even at this point. Now, it's not essential that you watch every episode. You can actually skip a lot of the show because The Clone Wars is an anthology series, so it has arcs of episodes that will be about completely different things and completely different characters, or even like be different genres. What I love so much about The Clone Wars is that it's a variety show that can be about anything that happened during the Clone Wars, and I think that's a lot of fun to just explore a lot of random different things in the Star Wars universe. Of course, most of it does have to do with the actual Clone War and the Jedi fighting it. But yeah, it's a fantastic show, and it wasn't released in chronological order, which I know if you're like new to this, that's weird to hear. But once you watch it in the order that I have here, it'll all make sense. Which, like I said, my order is pretty much chronological. There's just a few points at which I've modified it just to make pacing or, you know, overall flow of the story better, but it's not even noticeable when I've switched up the true chronological order here. One thing to mention is that the Thrawn Ascendancy novel trilogy, it takes place, I think, towards the end of the Clone Wars and like a little bit afterwards. I haven't read it yet, and as far as I'm aware, it doesn't really involve any events that have to do with the rest of the galaxy. It's almost sort of its own thing. So I don't know what's the best place to read it in. It's actually the second Thrawn trilogy that has been made in canon, but it takes place before the first trilogy. I'm currently reading through the first Thrawn book, and it's my assumption that it would be better to read the first Thrawn trilogy before this prequel one. So once I get around to this, I might move it much later in the timeline than when it actually takes place for those reasons, but I'm not really sure yet because I haven't read it. Now, after the Clone Wars Season 6, the show was originally canceled, and unfinished episodes were turned into other various media, and then the show was brought back for a 7th season, where they finished sort of the main story of the show, but they didn't finish all of the unfinished episodes. So just know that if you want to get the full story of the Clone Wars after you finish Season 6, there's a few non-Clone Wars episodes, content that you should probably read and watch in order to have closure to all of the characters in the show. So there's actually an unfinished Utapau arc that had to do with Anakin and Obi-Wan investigating some strange dealings on the planet. And it used to be available, I think, both on StarWars.com and on YouTube, but then Disney took it down. So I don't know if it's available anymore, but there's one specific scene that's really great that I think you should watch. I won't spoil what it is because it'll spoil other things. But if you look at my document, it'll have links to watch that specific scene, which I think does add a lot to the overall show. Okay, then one of the only comic entries I have is Darth Maul, Son of Dathomir. This is an adaptation of an arc that explains something that happens to Darth Maul during this time period of the show. And then there's the novel Dark Disciple, which explains things that happen to Ventress. It's made out of 8 unfinished Clone Wars episodes, and it's a really great story. Okay, and then you should watch the Clone Wars Season 7, which was made much more recently than the rest of the show. Episodes 5 through 8 actually take place before episodes 1 through 4, and then the final 4 episodes of the show overlap with the Skywalker Saga, Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. So there's a few different options for how you can watch them. Also the first episode of The Bad Batch, which is a spin-off show of the Clone Wars. the first episode of that show also takes place during Revenge of the Sith. So if you want to watch them all on their own, then this is the order that I personally would recommend. Some people recommend different orders, but I think it's the most interesting to wrap up the Clone Wars show first and have some mystery as to what's happening with the characters that aren't in that arc. Then watch the movie and you'll find out what actually happened with those characters. And then you watch The Bad Batch because it's starting a new story instead of wrapping up an old one. Although I think the best way to watch this content for the first time would be my extended edition fan edit, which combines those last 4 episodes of the Clone Wars with Revenge of the Sith. Seeing how those events play out in order and how they sort of like affect each other, it just adds to the overall experience of ending the story of the Clone War. And even though it's jumping back and forth from live action to animation, it really doesn't matter at all once you get used to it, and it's just, to me at least, the best way to see the end of that story, and then just watch the first episode of The Bad Batch afterwards. Now, there's a third option. If you've seen all of this before and you don't care too much about like pacing and tone and everything, I've made another fan edit that includes the first episode of The Bad Batch. Now, like I said, it doesn't fit in as well as the final arc of the Clone Wars, mostly because it's setting up a new story while the other 2 stories are finishing their stories. And you're kind of more interested in the stories that are finishing in that moment, so you kind of don't want to pay attention to this new story when all these like climactic events are also transpiring. But yeah, you have options there. If you want to watch my fan edits, just email justiceforct5555@gmail.com. I'm currently sharing them that way. Please be subscribed to Disney Plus so that it's not pirating and so that Disney doesn't get mad at me. If Disney does get mad at me, I'll have to stop sharing it. So hopefully that doesn't happen. But yeah, till then, that's how you can watch it. By the way, I just want to take a quick break from going through this list to let you know that I make a lot of videos that aren't just about Star Wars. I do reviews of movies, series, books, video games, and music. And the next review that I am currently editing is a review of the greatest film of all time, Paddington 2, of course, which I made with my sister. So yeah, here's a quick sneak preview. Coming soon. Okay, so with that, we enter a new era, which is the reign of the Empire. We have The Bad Batch here, which, if you don't know what this series is about, it's a spin-off from the Clone Wars about the Bad Batch that was introduced in season 7. They're a group of clones who are all genetically mutated to have like specific abilities that are different from normal clones. And I think The Bad Batch is a really interesting look at the transition from the Republic to the Empire, and it also just has really great characters. Alright, now the last comic that I have included on this list for now is Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith. There's 4 like main volumes of this comic, and I have all of them on the list, but I don't think you should read all volumes at once necessarily if you want to sort of stay with chronological order. This comic is really good at like expanding on Vader's fall to the dark side, because in Revenge of the Sith, it is kind of sudden and you sort of wonder why he's not questioning Palpatine more about these things, and all of that gets answered in this comic series. It's also really exciting. You see Vader hunting down Jedi survivors, and it picks up literally like right at the end of Revenge of the Sith. I recommend reading this first volume of the comic after episode 3 of The Bad Batch, which is just because in episode 3 of The Bad Batch, that's when Tarkin leaves Kamino, and after he leaves Kamino has to be where he meets up with Vader and the Emperor in the epilogue of Revenge of the Sith, which takes place shortly after a scene with Tarkin in this comic. So yeah, it's not as confusing as you think once you just read it in this order. When it comes to The Bad Batch, you can't really skip episodes. There's 2 episodes I've put on here that maybe you could skip, but I really think you should just watch the whole thing. It's not an anthology series like the Clone Wars, so it is just one continuous storyline, so it gets confusing to skip parts of it. And then sometime later this year, we're gonna get season 2 of The Bad Batch, which will obviously take place after season 1. Then I have the next 2 volumes of the Darth Vader Dark Lord of the Sith comic. And then 1 year after Revenge of the Sith, we have the young adult novel Ahsoka, which overall, I like the story that was told. I just think that the actual plot of the book, especially during the middle act, was quite boring. So if you're a big fan of Ahsoka, I definitely think that you should read this. If not, I would say skip it, but it does a great job of developing her after the rise of the Empire and how all of that has like affected her and who she chooses to become next, sort of, if that makes sense. Also, the audiobook is narrated by her voice actress, Ashley Eckstein, so that's sort of like an added bonus to listening to the audiobook for that one. Okay, next we have Catalyst, a Rogue One novel, which is one of the novels that's a prequel to the movie Rogue One. This book is about Galen Erso, who's a scientist who ends up working on the Death Star without knowing that he's working on the Death Star. This is probably my second favorite Star Wars book that I've read so far, and that's just because it feels like a really unique story. It's like a slow-moving political thriller where Orson Krennic is manipulating Galen to work on the Death Star, and it's just really interesting. It actually starts during the Clone Wars, but considering where the book ends, I think it's best to read it here. Okay, and then we have some books that are 5 years after Revenge of the Sith. It's sort of weird how Lucasfilm oftentimes chooses to place things 5 or 10 years before and after something. Like, they should have more things that are like 3 or 2 or 4. Like, why is it always these really even numbers of like 5 and 10? It's kind of odd. Anyways, there's the novel Lords of the Sith, which is about some early rebels making an assassination attempt on Vader and the Emperor. Of course, I mean, you should have seen the original trilogy at this point, according to my watch order. So you know that they don't succeed, but it's still a really interesting story, and it connects to the Clone Wars, the Bad Batch, and Rebels. And it also explores more of what's going on inside Vader's head, sort of like the comic does, but really even more in depth in a way, just because, you know, a book can flesh something out more than a comic. Then after that, there's Tarkin, which I loved. This, I guess, if I'm still trying to rank these, this might be my third favorite of the books so far that I've read. This is just a character study of Grand Moff Tarkin. It shows his backstory and current events going on, and it sort of tells the story of how he ends up working closely with Vader. And something that I really love about this book is it doesn't really treat Tarkin as a villain. It's just the story is told from his point of view, and you really understand him and where he's coming from, even though, you know, he is like pretty much pure evil. The author of this book, when writing from his perspective, doesn't see him as pure evil, just sees him more as like logical. And this definitely made Tarkin a much more interesting character for me. I mean, I already loved him. I mean, I hate him, but love him at the same time. Yeah, this just, it really fleshed him out into being one of the strongest villains in the Star Wars universe. Okay, then there's the fourth volume of Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith, the comic. Yep. And then the video game Jedi Fallen Order. This is my favorite Star Wars video game. It's very fun to play, and it has a great story. It plays sort of similar to the Dark Souls or like Bloodborne or Sekiro type games, but sort of easier and kind of clunkier, but I mean, it's still a lot of fun. If you like those type of games, I definitely recommend playing this game on the hardest difficulty. I think it just adds to it if you're someone who's experienced with video games and likes that type of action game. And yeah, it's also just a really great story about a Jedi who survived Order 66 and him kind of dealing with the trauma of that and figuring out where to go next. 1 year after that, we have the young adult novel Most Wanted. This is a prequel to the movie Solo, and it fleshes out Han and Kira more with their life on Corellia prior to the film. I wasn't necessarily expecting to like this book that much, but I really enjoyed it actually. And I think that watching Solo after reading this book does add a lot to Solo. I don't think that Solo needs this book in order for you to understand what's going on in the story, which I don't think the movies should ever like fully rely on books, because I think that's kind of unfair to ask moviegoers to have to read a book before they watch a movie. I mean, it could be done, but it would just be weird. Anyways, I really had fun with the quick story in this book. It's a pretty fast read, and Kira especially shines in this, and it just adds more meaning and depth to Solo. Solo if you watch Solo after reading it. But before Solo, I actually have the novel A New Dawn on the timeline because although Most Wanted takes place shortly before Solo's prologue scene, the rest of the movie takes place 3 years later. So A New Dawn is about Kanan and Hera from Rebels and how they meet. Honestly, I didn't like this book that much. It was okay. I think Kanan gets some really good character development, but the plot it's very slow moving. I didn't find all of the new characters to be all that engaging and interesting. So I would say if you really like Rebels and Kanan and Hera, then you should read it. If not, it's perfectly fine to skip it. Alright, then 1 year after that, we have Solo: A Star Wars Story, which I guess is a bit of a controversial movie amongst the fan base right now. It performed horribly at the box office. It flopped pretty hard, but there's been a real cult following of people who like the movie a lot that's risen up since it came out. And I am amongst that cult, you could say. I never wanted an origin story to Han Solo. I thought it was completely unnecessary. But the movie, I think, is actually really good and ends up being worthwhile in the long run. It's a story we didn't need, but it's a good story, and I like how it explores the underworld of Star Wars, which is something that we don't see as often as we should. And yeah, I think it's just a strong story on its own as well. There is a Lando series that has been announced. We know pretty much nothing about it other than that it's called Lando, so we don't know when it takes place, but my best guess for now is that it'll be with the young Lando played by Donald Glover and probably take place around Solo. It might be a bit before, a bit after, or it could be further in the future. We don't really know, but yeah, that's my guess for now. Alright, so 1 year after Solo, we have the Obi-Wan Kenobi series that's coming out this year. It's going to be 6 episodes long, and it's going to be about Obi-Wan when he's on Tatooine watching over Luke, and apparently he's going to confront Vader again, which I guess isn't really a spoiler because Lucasfilm has said that already, even though it would normally seem to be a spoiler to me. Anyways, once that show is out, I will add links to watch each episode to the Google document. Okay, then for now, I'm gonna put the novel Thrawn after Obi-Wan Kenobi. And I don't know what's the best place in the timeline to read this yet. I'm actually halfway through reading it right now, and it takes place over a few years of time. So I'm trying to find the right balance of where to put it on the timeline in a way that won't spoil future content, but won't be something that you read and it feels like you're reading it too late when most of it takes place earlier. So this is kind of my guess right now. And in terms of recommendation, so far, I like it quite a bit. It's not quite one of my favorite Star Wars novels, but I do really like all of the stuff with Thrawn. And really, most of my issues with the book so far are that about a third of it doesn't really have to do with Thrawn, at least halfway through the book. And those parts of the book aren't bad, it's just that every time I'm reading one of those chapters, I just wish I was reading a chapter that's about Thrawn, because he's a much more interesting character. But yeah, that novel ties into Rebels and sets him up as a character in Rebels. Okay, then we have A New Era, The Age of Rebellion. Now there's actually kind of a pretty big time jump here where they haven't made a lot of content between Kenobi and Rebels yet, but 4 years after Obi-Wan Kenobi and 5 years before A New Hope, we have Andor, which is also coming out later this year. It's going to be about the rebel Cassian Andor who was in Rogue One, and the series is kind of going to be a prequel about the early Rebel Alliance building up to Rogue One, I guess, and it's supposed to be like a spy thriller. They've said that it takes place 5 years before Rogue One, meaning that it'll take place around the same time as the first season of Rebels. So I don't know yet if it'll overlap with it at all. It might, and if it does, it might not even be noticeable. I don't know yet, so we'll just have to wait and see. Also, it's supposed to be 12 episodes, but I've recently heard rumors that they might be splitting the 12 episodes into 2 seasons, and each one would have 6 episodes. So I'm not sure about that yet, but of course I'll add it to the Google document once it's out. Okay, then we have the animated show Rebels, which in a way is sort of like a sequel to the Clone Wars, because some of the characters from the Clone Wars come back, but it is primarily about new characters and the forming of the Rebel Alliance leading into the original trilogy. Rebels is more made for kids than the Clone Wars was. The Clone Wars is very easy to watch as an adult for most of the episodes, at least. Rebels I found to be a bit of a struggle during season 1 to get through, since it's much more geared towards children, but for the most part after season 1 it's a lot easier to watch and is just overall more interesting. There are a few shorts, like short episodes that take place before the start of the show, but they're all like really short and they don't really add anything to it, so you don't need to watch them, but you can if you want to. So when it comes to the actual Rebels show, if you're skeptical of watching it because it being made for kids a bit more than Clone Wars was, then you can honestly skip pretty much all of season 1 and start the show with season 1, episode 13, Call to Action, because this is where the story really picks up and you can put together the main story of this show and sort of what's been going on from this episode, because you really haven't missed all that much that's completely necessary up to this point. It is better to watch all of season 1, but like I said, if you're not as into it because of the target audience, then just skip most of season 1. And really all that you'll be missing is a bit more background on how Ezra met the rest of the main characters and things having to do with his home planet Lothal, which will come back into play in the 4th season, so it is kind of nice to have the background for that, but it's not entirely necessary. Okay, so as Rebels goes on, years pass, and 3 years before the Battle of Yavin, there's the young adult novel, Leia, Princess of Alderaan. I've heard a lot of good things about this book, and I'm going to read it after Thrawn, but I haven't read it yet, so I'm not too sure on the placement. I've just kind of gone with like what Wikipedia says for now. Sorry, Wikipedia. And then possibly the next novel to read would be the young adult novel Rebel Rising, which is the second of the 2 prequel novels to Rogue One. This one is about Jyn Erso and her being raised by Saw Gerrera and her life after that. I haven't read it yet. Pretty much any book from this point forward I haven't read yet, since I'm going through most of them in chronological order. I have heard that this adds like a lot of background to Jyn Erso that makes Rogue One a much better movie, because I personally found it to be lacking in terms of the characters in the movie. But for now, I'm also not sure what's the best point at which to read this book, because it pretty much covers Jyn's whole life up to Rogue One. I think it ends right before Rogue One, but Saw Gerrera plays a major role in it, and he ends up showing up in seasons 3 and 4 of Rebels, so I'm guessing it might be best to read it after season 2 of Rebels and before season 3 to get the background on Saw Gerrera before going into the show. Not that it's necessary or anything. Like I said, pretty much all of these books are completely optional, but if you're gonna pick a best point to read it, that's my guess for now. But yeah, I'll update it once I have actually read it. Then after season 3 of Rebels, there's the second book in the first Thrawn trilogy, which is called Thrawn Alliances. I haven't read this one, of course. I'm still on the first Thrawn book, but this one is about Thrawn working with Darth Vader, and then it also has flashbacks to something he worked on with Anakin during the Clone Wars. Obviously, this being a sequel to Thrawn, I don't think it makes sense to read this back during the Clone Wars. Also, since one of the stories in this book takes place like in the current time after Rebels season 3, I think this just makes sense to read it here. Okay, and then there's Rebels season 4, and during Rebels season 4 is the third Thrawn novel called Treason. I've heard that Thrawn ends up sort of being at odds with Orson Krennic in this, which excites me because I really liked Krennic in Catalyst. I haven't read it. Apparently it takes place during the time that Thrawn leaves Lothal and before he comes back for like the season finale. So yeah, of course I'll update that with what I think is the best order to read and watch the show in after I've actually read that. Alright, yeah, and then you just finish Rebels. One thing to mention is if for some reason you didn't watch the original trilogy before starting the chronological order and like you've never seen it ever, which is a really rare situation, but if you're in that situation at this point, don't watch the epilogue scene of the last episode of Rebels once there's like a fade to black, because that scene takes place after the original trilogy and will spoil things in it. And then at this point, we are less than 1 year before A New Hope. I've put the junior novel Guardians of the Whills on here. The characters of Chirrut and Baze, it sort of expands on them and gives them a little bit of a backstory. I didn't put that many junior novels on this list, but for whatever reason, I was intrigued enough to get this book, so I'm going to end up reading it once I get here in the timeline myself. Okay, and then we have Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. I wouldn't say that this movie is like essential, but it does add more background to the Empire and the Death Star and the Rebel Alliance prior to A New Hope, since the movie ends very shortly before A New Hope. And it has a lot of exciting action scenes. For me, the characters in it are kind of lacking. I haven't seen it in a while, so I'm curious to see if after reading Catalyst and Rebel Rising, if that makes me like the characters from the books enough to enjoy the movie more. But yeah, I mean, overall, the movie's pretty fun. It's just, I don't really care about the characters in it. Okay, and then we're back to A New Hope. One thing that I put in the notes on the watch order list here is that if you originally watched the theatrical cut or cuts of the original trilogy, then maybe watch the current release that George Lucas edited to add things in years past. Maybe watch that one now, because technically that's the canon cut of the movie, so it'll fit in better with the rest of the canon things. I personally think those official George Lucasified cuts are inferior to his original cuts, but for the most part, it's not like there's huge differences either way. But just a little suggestion is maybe do watch the special editions this time. Alright, then there's some books that take place during A New Hope. There's a book called From a Certain Point of View. It tells a bunch of different stories from like background characters during A New Hope, I think, that happened during the movie. I haven't read it yet. And then there's also Battlefront 2 Inferno Squad. I've played the Battlefront 2 game, which takes place later in the timeline, and I think this novel's kind of like an origin story for them, and it takes place during A New Hope. Like I said, I haven't read it yet, so yeah. Then there's the novel Heir to the Jedi, which is about Luke after A New Hope. I don't know much about it, but I've heard a lot of bad things about it from the people who have read it, so if I ever get around to that one, I'll update you guys on if I think it's worth it or not. Then there's the audio drama Dr. Aphra. Dr. Aphra is a big character in the Star Wars comics, which, as you know, I'm not really into the comics that much. As far as I'm aware, this audio drama sort of adapts some main parts of her story from the comics into this audio drama, which is nice for people like me who don't care about comics all that much. But yeah, pretty much any book or anything like that from this point forward, I have not read yet. And then 3 years after A New Hope is The Empire Strikes Back. Once again, we have some books that take place during the movie. There's From a Certain Point of View, The Empire Strikes Back, which is just like the one for A New Hope. I'm assuming they're going to make one for Return of the Jedi, probably coming out in 2023 for the 40-year anniversary of Return of the Jedi as well. Also taking place during The Empire Strikes Back is the novel Battlefront Twilight Company. I really know nothing about this book other than what I just told you. Okay, 1 year after The Empire Strikes Back is Return of the Jedi. And then there's some books that take place after Return of the Jedi that sort of wrap up the galactic civil war of the rebels versus the Empire. I've placed the young adult novel Lost Stars here. It actually starts quite a bit before A New Hope, apparently, and ends a year after Return of the Jedi. From what I understand, it follows these two, like, sort of background characters throughout the original trilogy, and you see their point of view. This book is acclaimed by fans as being one of the best canon Star Wars books, so I'm excited to read it, and I think it would most likely make sense to read it after the original trilogy. Okay, and then there is the Alphabet Squadron trilogy, which is about some fighter pilots, taking care of the last of the Empire, I think, and the Aftermath trilogy, which I think tells like a broader version of the end of the Galactic Civil War, which ends a year after Return of the Jedi. You also see some of that in the game Battlefront 2 if you play the campaign. I personally didn't like the story that much in the game. It had some nice ideas, but it's the pacing is really rushed and the characters are not developed that much. Oh, also, there's the game Squadrons, which takes place around the same time period. It also has a campaign that deals with somewhat similar stuff, with fighter pilots working to finish the war with the Empire. And I haven't played that game at all. It would be interesting to check out at some point, though. I'm gonna take one more break from the list, just to let you guys know that if you like my content, whether it be my reviews or fan edits or this type of thing that I'm just doing randomly because I feel like it, I do have ways that you can support me with your money if that's something that you feel like doing. Of course, it's not necessary, but I do have a Patreon and also channel memberships. They will get you access to a few exclusive perks, such as behind the scenes videos and some update posts on what I'm working on that I don't share publicly. If you're feeling generous and don't want any of those perks or rewards, you can also just donate to me through YouTube's Supers feature or through Streamlabs. There will be links to all of that in the description. So if you choose to give me your money, then thank you. It's very much appreciated. Like I said, not necessary, but wanted to mention it because I'm poor. Okay, next era, the New Republic. There's a novel called Last Shot, which is about Han and Lando dealing with something 3 years after Return of the Jedi, and I think it also has flashbacks to things that happened shortly after Solo or something like that. But yeah, I haven't read it. All right, then we have The Mandalorian, and actually we have a few live action TV shows that are going to overlap once they're all out. The Mandalorian takes place 5 years after Return of the Jedi. It's very good. It's very reminiscent of the original trilogy in the way that it takes Lucas's main inspirations from it, such as like westerns and samurai films, and makes that like the main inspiration for the series. And it's just a lot of fun. Of course, you also have Baby Yoda, who's super cute. So yeah, I recommend you just watch every episode. Don't skip any, and see seasons 1 and 2, and then the Book of Boba Fett is coming out right now. As of recording this, only the first episode is out, but I'll be updating the list with links to the other episodes once they're out. Now, the Book of Boba Fett has some flashbacks to before The Mandalorian, but I think it's just best to watch it here and to have the reveal of Boba Fett's return be in The Mandalorian, because that's how the creator sort of intended for you to experience that, even though I just spoiled it for you, but I can't spoil it without mentioning the existence of a show about Boba Fett. And then The Mandalorian Season 3 might be coming out later this year, or it might be next year, but I'm assuming it will take place after the Book of Boba Fett, or maybe during it a bit. We don't really know yet. I'm also assuming that it's 8 episodes long, like the previous seasons. And then there's an Ahsoka series, which, spoilers, if you didn't know that Ahsoka lives this long. The series is going to be about Ahsoka in live action now, being played by Rosario Dawson after The Mandalorian Season 2. I don't know exactly when the episodes will take place throughout the rest of it. So I'm sure that those 3 shows will go on and intertwine and have more episodes and things in that time period. That's pretty much all we have for the New Republic, although I guess the young adult novel Poe Dameron Freefall probably counts, even though it has more to do with sequel trilogy characters because it's Poe. But I think that book is about his past as a spice smuggler, which you hear about in The Rise of Skywalker, which is kind of random that they threw that in there in the 3rd movie, but now there's a book about it. And it takes place 9 years after The Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett. Okay, then we have the final era for now, the Rise of the First Order. So this is the sequel trilogy era. It's the most controversial among the fan base right now. A lot of people don't like how the sequel trilogy ended up turning out. I am among those people, but I probably also disagree with a lot of them because I actually liked The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi for the most part. But anyways, it is canon, and I've also seen the show Resistance. So 3 years after Poe Dameron Freefall, there's going to be a novel coming out this year called Shadow of the Sith. It's going to be about Luke and Lando finding Exegol, which is the planet that Palpatine resurrects on, which I guess is a spoiler, but at the same time it's not a spoiler because in the movie that Palpatine is resurrected and they just like say it as if it's something you already knew anyways, and it's very strange. 7 years after Shadow of the Sith is the novel Bloodline. I've actually heard a lot of good things about this novel. It's about Leia dealing with some unrest in the New Republic Senate, having having to do with people finding out that she's Darth Vader's daughter, I think. And I think it's like the story about how she creates the resistance to the First Order, because like most of the Senate doesn't really take them to be a serious threat. 2 years after that is the young adult novel Force Collector. I know hardly anything about this. I think it's about some random Force sensitive person who has the Force ability where they touch something and then they see like memories from that object. Yeah, it seems kind of like a weird concept to me. I'm not sure if I'll end up reading this one, but I have it on the list just because I have pretty much all the novels. Okay, and then 3 years after that, this is really when most of the sequel trilogy type stuff starts with the show Resistance. Now, Resistance is more made for kids than Rebels was. It's also animated. It's 3D animated, but it has a rendering style that sort of makes it look 2D animated in a way. I had very low expectations for Resistance because I hadn't heard that many good things about it. So the show actually surprised me, and I actually do think I liked it overall, but if you're not like a major Star Wars fan, then I don't know if you would like it too. What I like the most about this series is that it really like explores this one pocket of the galaxy in like a lot of depth, and it's just kind of a neat show about these people who like race these like flying speeder things on this ocean planet, and then the First Order ends up like slowly taking over. It's also good for how it like develops sort of the takeover of the First Order, which happens more suddenly in the sequel trilogy, so it gives you some more context for that, which is nice. But there's some very goofy characters. There's a lot of comic relief for kids that is not funny to adults. So yeah, maybe try the series if you want, but you know, take it with a grain of salt. It might not be your thing. The novel Phasma, which gives a backstory to Phasma, apparently takes place around the time of being between episodes 16 and 17 of season 1 of Resistance, so that's where I plugged it in for now. The junior novel Before the Awakening is about Rey, Finn, and Poe before The Force Awakens. I don't know if it'll be worth reading. I have the book because I used to be more interested in the sequel trilogy before it ended, and I guess I should probably read it eventually because I own it, so that's why I've included it on the list. Anyways, the first film in the sequel trilogy, The Force Awakens, it takes place after episode 19 of Resistance, and then actually Resistance episodes 20, 21, and then season 2 episode 1, they all take place during The Force Awakens. I've actually considered maybe making a fan edit that puts it all in order, but the issue is I don't think enough people care about Resistance to want to see that, and also it just wouldn't work very well in terms of pacing and overall story, because I've sort of like worked it out in my head what it would be like if I did make that fan edit, so who knows, maybe I'll do something like that someday, but I don't think it's really necessary. Okay, and then the game Battlefront 2 has a DLC called Resurrection that tells a story that takes place during The Force Awakens as well, and the novel Galaxy's Edge Black Spire also takes place during The Force Awakens. I guess it's about the Galaxy's Edge theme park. I haven't been to it, so the novel might just kind of be like glorified marketing material. I don't know how good it is. All right, and then we have Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi. As of right now, I think this is the most controversial Star Wars movie. I really liked it, but a lot of the fans didn't. It's very polarizing, but yeah. Season 2, Episode 2 of Resistance does take place during the movie. And then after that, there's the novel Resistance Reborn. Now, I've actually read this novel, and it's actually very good. It's a better sequel to The Last Jedi than The Rise of Skywalker is. Specifically for Poe, he has a really nice arc in it, and overall, it's a pretty fun book. I wouldn't say it's great, but it is good. So then you have most of the rest of Resistance Season 2. Resistance only has 2 seasons. It was canceled pretty quickly. I guess I don't think that many people were watching it. But after season 2, episode 16, there's the young adult novel Galaxy's Edge, A Crash of Fate, another Galaxy's Edge theme park tie-in novel or something. I don't know if I'll read those, to be honest with you. And then this is where the actual theme park takes place, like in canon, where it's like supposed to take place. So yeah. Okay, and then at this point in the timeline, we're now like a year after The Force Awakens. We have the last 3 episodes of Resistance, and then The Rise of Skywalker, which is the last episode of the Skywalker saga for now, maybe ever. I don't know. The Rise of Skywalker goes in a very strange direction that I really didn't like, being someone who was a fan of the first 2 sequel trilogy films, and it has story decisions in it that are so strange that it has made me sort of have valued the whole sequel era a lot less. I'm still kind of getting over it. I mean, you know, I'm not angry anymore, but it's just disappointing still that it kind of ended up like this. Perhaps future stories will better lead into and provide more context into some of the weirder things in The Rise of Skywalker, such as Palpatine coming back, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Then there's a movie called Rogue Squadron. I think it was recently delayed, and I'm not sure if it takes place after the sequel trilogy, but in the like official post about it, they said that it takes place in a future era, so I'm guessing that means it takes place after the sequel trilogy. It's gonna be about fighter pilots that fly X-Wings, and I don't think we know that much else about it yet. So that is the end of the chronological canon for now. I did include Visions here at the end as non-canonical content because I think Visions is pretty fun. It's an anime anthology series of a bunch of like anime short films that aren't canon, but they're all pretty fun for the most part. And then there's some unreleased things that we don't know where they take place yet. Taika Waititi is going to direct a movie, and that's all we know about that project. There's going to be a series called A Droid Story, which I don't know what that's about exactly. Maybe it's like R2 and 3PO telling some of their past stories or something. And then Rian Johnson is directing his own film trilogy. It's been kind of iffy on whether or not that's still happening, but last we've heard from Ryan, it is still happening, and we don't know what it's about at all. Then there's a game that Ubisoft is making. It's going to be an open world game. We don't know anything about it other than that. One last thing to mention is there was going to be a series called Rangers of the New Republic, which was going to take place around the same time as The Mandalorian, The Book of Boba Fett, and Ahsoka, but I'm pretty sure that show has been canceled. I think Kathleen Kennedy like confirmed it in an interview, so it's no longer on this list. Okay, so that's that. If you've read Star Wars novels or seen a lot of the shows or just have general thoughts on Star Wars that you want to share in the comments, feel free. That would be fun. Just don't be mean to people if they don't like the same Star Wars things that you like. I think sometimes Star Wars fans get a bit too violent and irrational with their arguments on the quality of some Star Wars stories. So yeah. Also, I'm going to be making a few updates to my Revenge of the Sith fan edits. I'm going to be adding deleted scenes to the extended edition, adding subtitles to the Ultimate Edition, and then I might have something else in store too. So yeah, you'll just have to wait and see. But like I mentioned earlier, I make a lot of videos that have nothing to do with Star Wars, and that's really the heart and soul of my YouTube channel. That's my passion here, don't get me wrong. I like Star Wars, I like making videos like this once in a while, but it's not really what this channel is to me. So if you would, please check out my reviews and my main Madman's Knowledge series, which I will link a card to on screen now, or there will be an end screen that has a playlist or something like that. Yeah. All right. Bye. Thanks for watching.